Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, we're a little wet. We had 37 tornadoes hit the Midwest for a second day.
Wow.
Houses were demolished. The Lucas Speedway in Kansas City was demolished. Twisted metal, airborne, 2x4s, timbers, trees, power lines taken down. 2 people died. Tractor trailers flipped over. Animals killed, and so we had some flooding in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and Missouri. And 50 people at least were pulled from the floodwaters because of the downpours that inundated roads and homes. I don't know how that happens, but it does. And so we've had, at our farm, we've measured 3¼ inches of rain in 2 days. And there's not much place for the rain to go because the ground is waterlogged already. From weeks of rain prior to that, the gutters overflowed. The leaders couldn't handle the downpour. So our orchard has been damaged. It took over 10 years to establish our orchard on our farm, and the winds took a lot of that apart. And our driveway, I'm still looking for our driveway where it used to be. It's gone downhill, so I've got to go. Yeah, so I've got to. Yeah, after the broadcast, I'm going to get on the backhoe and see if I can find some of our driveway and put it back to where it was. And the thing that really bothers me the most... Is this
like concrete slabs?
No, actually, our driveway is crushed stone. It's 3/4 inch. It's crushed lime. It's 3/4 inch. And the rains were so heavy, it just washed rivulets in our driveway. And so I've got to go downhill and go get with a backhoe and go grab the driveway.
Go and get the rocks.
Back. Yeah. Interesting thing that happened is, and I think we need to try people for this. I mean, arrest them, bring them to court, try them for manslaughter. Now, what's happened, and I've been complaining about this for years, but it's time to complain about it again. I'm not sure who approves this nonsense, but they have these cheese graters, as I refer to them. They are these very heavy aircraft cables that are strung like guitar strings parallel to the interstate, so you cannot cross. And they call them crossover barriers. So and the interstates have these grassy medians that might be, I don't know, sometimes hundreds of feet wide, sometimes 50 feet wide. Well, the idea was that if you ever had to get out of the way, if you're traveling east and you had to get out of the way, you could get into the median in the center between the east and west lanes. Mm-hmm. Or if you had to turn around in an emergency, you could. Or if an emergency vehicle like an ambulance had to cross the interstate or the highway, it could. But these bozos in the Department of Transportation at the federal and state levels have approved these designs where they prevent crossover. So an ambulance can't cross over to get to the accident or crash quickly. They've got to go miles and miles out of their way east and then turn around and go west, go over the overpasses. So you can't cross the medians. And I have been traveling west on Interstate 44 towards Springfield, and I've seen tornadoes ahead of me, and there's no place to go. There's no exits that are nearby.
Oh my
I can't
gosh.
cross. Yeah, I can't turn around. There's no place to go. And then you have these people barreling at 70 miles an hour with tractor trailers behind you that are oblivious to what's going on. And if you stop, they'll crash into you. If you go straight, you're going to go into a tornado. It's awful. And there's no place to go.
That's terrible.
Now, yes. Now, if it were illegal, if there was a sign that said, do not cross the median, if I were able to, if the cheese graters weren't there, and it said it's illegal to cross. But if I were in an emergency situation, I absolutely, positively would get in the median and get out of the way. And hopefully some people with half a brain behind me would do the same thing. Even better than that, people in front of me would do it before I got there. But no, you can't. You can't, because these criminals...
Even if you drove along the median, not necessarily into the oncoming traffic.
Right.
But if you just got off the road so that you could go in the opposite direction.
But you can't. You can't, because the medians, these cheese graters are designed so that you can't get off the road. You cannot get off the road. Mm-hmm. You're trapped. So I try to avoid the interstates wherever I can. I take the side roads, the access roads. So I just wanted to tell our class that I believe that we should arrest the people who have designed and approved these cheese graters.
Because when there is a crash, it's really bad. Because that's exactly what they do to vehicles and people, is they cut them up.
Yes,
they
and a motorcycle
them and dice them.
And a motorcycle doesn't have a chance.
Especially motorcyclists. They slice them and dice them.
Right.
They cut them in pieces.
Then you have these stupid cars known as smart cars, which are like a quarter of a car, which your knees are the front bumper. And if you hit anything like a cheese grater with that, you're dead. And if you have one of these small new cars, one of these little Asian cars that say made in Asia on the bottom, those lightweight little things that they've stripped all the steel that they possibly can out of them, and you hit something like a cheese grater, you're probably going to die. So what do? We arrest and try the people involved in the decisions, the politicians, the bureau rats who are in the Department of Transportation. We arrest them and try them for manslaughter. And what we need to do is take them all down, go back to where we were. But the point of these cheese graters, they say it's to prevent crossover accidents. It prevents crossover everything. Crossing over to rescue people, crossing over to get out of harm's way, crossover for everything you can possibly think of. That's what it does. And it puts the people who maintain the medians, those grassy medians, in harm's way because they can't maintain between the road and the median. They have to spray that with Roundup. So I'm sure Monsanto loves these crossover cheese graters. I'm sure they love them because you can't mow them because you'll get run over by the traffic. It's terrible. Well, that was the 39 tornadoes that took aim at Missouri, Kansas, Texas, and Oklahoma in the last couple of days. Unbelievable. Devastation, smashed houses. And so where does this come from? I mean, this is pretty devastating. I don't remember anything like this. I was at Joplin. I saw that, and it looked like a lawnmower just mowed right across Joplin. You would think that we'd get a little smarter and help protect people from this insanity, but instead we have cheese graters to make sure that you're funneled right into harm's way. It's time that we go to City Hall and start arresting these politicians. It's time we start doing that. But I don't think we will. So what's happened with all this flooding? The insecticides that were in garages and buildings are now into the surface water, which will soon be the groundwater, and we will have all kinds of chemicals in the drinking water. because of our own stupidity. We've allowed this to happen. And I'm not sure, I'm not exactly sure who started these cheese graters. I'm not sure whose bright idea it was, but I'd like to meet that guy. And I'd like to debate him or her. These people are sick. So, Guineith, what's happening today in class?
Okay, well, in class today we're going to discuss plants that are growing on your property, plants that you can introduce to your property, and, just the general attitude that you as a preparedness-minded person ought to have to plants that are growing on your land. And I'm thinking in particular, we have a neighbour who had a particular, or has a particular tree growing on their land, okay? That's a tree that's not real common around here. It's called a paulownia tree. That's Paulownia. And my neighbour didn't really like this tree very much and thought, I'll go and cut that tree down. And so they cut the tree down, and within 6 months, this tree had sent up suckers because it was cut down basically to ground level, to a stump. It had sent up suckers that were, 8, 10, 12 feet tall within 6 months. And, anyone out there in the class who's had anything to do with paulownia trees by now is completely laughing their head off, because that's exactly what they do. They're the world's fastest growing trees. And these trees are the thickness of my wrist. I mean, I'm a lady, I've got maybe 2-inch wide wrists. That's the thickness that these suckers have grown within 6 months. But it also sent out runners, okay? And runners are root extensions. This is in response to it being cut down to ground level. Runners are root extensions that grow out a certain distance from the tree and spring up above the soil and produce a new tree. And you can cut those runners and you can replant them anywhere.
Hold that thought.
And they will grow.
We're going to break. We'll be right back. We're talking about the paulownia trees. Guineith, I understand that they are the fastest growing tree. Yeah.
I have not heard of any tree that grows faster than a paulownia tree. They get to a millable size in just 5 to 7 years, depending on your climate. And by that time, they're going to have a diameter of 12 to 18 inches round. So that's a diameter that you can cut and you can make. Actually, it's highly valued as a furniture timber because it is straight grained. Of course, you need to prune them properly in order to get good timber out of them. But they're easy to prune. While the tree is alive, the wood is relatively soft and it's pale coloured, it's beautiful timber, but once it's dried out, it hardens. It hardens out beautifully and is a timber that is so strong you can use it for making furniture, you can use it for building houses, you can use it for any purpose that you would use timber for. And it takes just 5 to 7 years to grow a millable log. In contrast to if you're in a suitable climate and you want to grow a radiata pine, okay, that's a Monterey pine, you would be waiting 30 to 40 or 50 years, depending on your location, to get a millable log out of Monterey pine. And but the difference is with, paulownia trees, they don't have any heartwood. okay? And that's really, really interesting because instead of having heartwood, they have a hollow, soft, pithy center. So the entirety of the wood in the tree is good, usable wood, with the exception of maybe about an inch round hollow in the middle, which is really, really different to, any other sort of timber where you can only mill a part of the tree depending on the species. Some species you use the heartwood, other species you use the sapwood. But with these trees, it's all sapwood, but the sapwood is of such a quality that you can use it all. And, there's a lot of parts of the United States where paulownias just grow rampantly. I'm thinking especially here of the Appalachian Mountains and the entire Carolina coast, all the way up to, Virginia to Washington, D.C., all that area. As soon as you get anywhere out of town, the forest has just been taken over by paulownia trees because, and Florida as well, because in the early days when they would get imports of crockery from China, they would be packed in cases which were padded. You know how you get those, packing beans, those polystyrene packing beans that you get today for,
Sure.
if you buy some crockery or something, and they pack them with these polystyrene beans.
Yeah, we receive them all the time, and we save them in plastic bags so that if we ship something out, we reuse them. Yeah,
that's right. Well, in the old days, they didn't have these polystyrene beans. They used paulownia pods instead because they're soft, and yet they're not so soft. They don't compress easily, but they're not so scratchy that they'll damage any products that are packed in amongst them. And the paulownia pods were full of paulownia seeds, and when the goods were gotten out of their cases and taken to the shops or whatever that were going to sell them, the pods were just tipped all over the shorefront. And the pods were full of seeds, and the seeds grew into trees, and that's where the rampant paulownia problem in Florida all the way up to Washington, D.C. has come from.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that when we come back, and I'll tell you about some plywood that I have here. So, a few years ago, we bought some nickel iron cells for our solar system here at the farm, and they weighed 8,800 pounds for 80 cells. And I split the load with one of our instructors, so we have 40 and he has 40. And they came in these very large plywood boxes or crates. And the plywood is not the same plywood that we have here in the United States. It weighs a lot less. For the same thickness, the same size sheet, it weighs much, much less. And I believe
that's
that
very white plywood.
It is.
That's paulownia.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it
That's
seems
paulownia.
pretty strong.
It's very white timber.
Mm-hmm. It seems very, very strong, but very light. The plywood here in the United States, the domestic plywood, is much heavier for the thickness and size for size. The domestic North American plywood is much heavier than this. But it seems to be okay. And I've saved these boxes so that I can make dog houses out of them, chicken houses out of them. So I just stored them in the barn. They're roughly 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet, so 4 foot cubes. And all I need to do is cut a little hole in it and and the dogs can go in there after, I make sure that they are cleaned out. But they don't seem to withstand the weather as well as domestic plywood. And I don't know if it's the wood or the cheap glue that they use, but it's one of those, or both. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that it's probably the cheap glue because with regards to water resistance, they use paulownia to make surfboards.
Yes.
So they are a timber that is inherently, does well in extreme environments, but the glue is probably the problem.
And also
because,
it's used for skis. It's used for skis as well, right?
Yes, that's right. And also, interestingly enough, the Chinese use it for making, and the Japanese use it for making babies' cribs and coffins and wedding chests, dowry chests, because it's considered to be a very lucky timber, and it's considered to be the tree of immortality because they're really hard to kill. Once they're established, it doesn't take much to establish them. You put one little section of root down in the soil, and you're going to get a tree growing from that root, even if it doesn't look like there's any feeder roots or anything. If you put one section of root down in the soil and just bury it, come springtime, you're going to have a tree there, and by the time that fall arrives, you're going to have a 12-foot tall tree. Mm-hmm. They are quite literally the world's fastest growing tree, and they can live to be a great age. If they're left undisturbed, they can get to be enormous, and there's, like I said, there's very little that seems to kill them. Now, the reason why I'm saying all of this is there's vast sections of the United States where these trees are regarded as being an absolute pest. There's thousands of them. The people who are living there live in abject poverty, and they don't know that they're actually surrounded by some of the best plantation timber on earth. If they would only get out there and start to manage what they have literally in their own backyards.
And you're talking
within
about
7 years.
Appalachia, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about Appalachia. There's people in Appalachia who own vast tracts of land, and they're dirt poor, absolutely dirt poor. And their lands are taken over by these paulownia trees, okay? And they don't know what to do with them. I'll tell you what you can do with them. You cut them down, and you can use that timber from these old growth paulownia trees. It's still usable. You can go and sell logs, and you will get you won't get a full price for them, okay? Because they're old growth and they'll have knots and they'll blah blah and all that. But there's some people who want to use these old twisted slabs of wood for making countertops and such like, and cabinets, okay? Because and you could be looking at I couldn't tell you in your local area, but it would be in the 4 figures per log. So, well, even for an old growth tree, well over $1,000 per log. And that's worth an afternoon's work, Vincent. And you don't kill the tree. You go back, and you go back, 7 years. You go back the next year, and you have a 12-foot tall pole, a number of 12-foot tall poles growing out of the stump. You pick the strongest one, and you leave it to grow, and you prune it about 2/3 to make a nice straight trunk, and you leave the top third of the tree to grow, and you cut all the other poles down. You take them home, and there's your garden stakes for the year, or you can sell them or cut them up for firewood or whatever you want to do with them. And but that pole that you've got, which you've left growing, in 7 years, will be a log. You know, if you keep pruning it so that about the top third of the tree stays as branches and the bottom 2/3 of the trunk, you know, you prune all the branches off so just as a trunk growing straight up, even if you've got to get a ladder out there and do something that way. Then at the end of that 7 years, you'll have a log that's worth $7,000 to $8,000. And that's worth the work that it will take to do that. And I'm just saying that because I know there's somebody out there listening to this show who lives up in the Appalachian Mountains who's been despair and whose property's been taken over by these trees, you know, because you can't get rid of them once they're in there. And you don't realise it, but you're sitting on an absolute gold mine. There's, even in the US, an absolutely sought-after timber tree. If you get off your backside, get out there in your backyard with your chainsaw and organise a mill, first of all, who wants to buy them, okay? Don't just get out there and cut them down, you know, without having a buyer. But you go and organise with a sawmill, tell them what's on your land, and you want to sell some logs to them, and tell them what's there, and I'm sure you'll find somebody who'll be willing to buy, you know, at least some of the logs off of your land, because you don't realise it, but you've got an eminently valuable saw log timber growing on your land, and it becomes more so when you begin to actually get out there off your backside and go manage your woodlot as you ought to do, you know.
Dennis, I know a farmer. I know him pretty well. And he bought this farm and had a lot of trees on it. And he found a sawmill that will buy his logs. He found a logger who will cut the logs, and they split it 50-50. So the logger gets half, the owner of the land gets half, the farmer, and the agreement is they're only going to cut $1,000 worth of trees a week.
Yeah.
So each one of them makes $500 a week from the trees, and it doesn't look like they're going to run out anytime soon. So
no.
He's paid off his mortgage. He's living comfortably, and he's not doing any work. The logger's doing the work, and he ends up with almost a square mile of farm as a result of thinning out his woods.
That's right. And you pick the best trees and you leave them to grow. And they are your seed stock. Okay? And you go through and you notice whether the seedlings are coming up. And, you know, for the first year or two, this is of any other species other than, although I have put tyres around my paulownias to that I planted down in the valley to, you know, to get them started. But those car tyres will be taken off them within probably 6 months, maybe just 3 or 4 months, because they'll be big enough where they won't need protection from anything. But ordinarily with a tree, if you put a car tyre around the tree, it stops people from accidentally standing on them. And funnily enough, it stops rabbits and most other livestock from eating them. Or you can put a woven wire mesh cage around them, you know, and that stops deer and stuff from just going through and cropping them. But yeah, if you've got a piece of land like this, you need to investigate that, because you could be sitting on a gold mine and not even knowing it, and you could find yourself doing, you know, this sort of deal like the logger and the landowner do. Mm-hmm. You know,
he does something else. And he does something else that you're doing when he plants his garden. One of the things that farmers seem to collect is used tires. And, you know, what do you do with them? The tire people don't want them. Nobody wants them. So what he does is he takes a reciprocating saw. Sometimes it's called a Sawzall, but that would be the Milwaukee brand. But DeWalt makes them. And so they have these saws that you hold with two hands, and has a blade that goes forward and backward. A short blade could be 12 inches, it could be 9 inches or 6 inches. And he cuts out the sidewall of the tire, and he leaves the tread. And then he fills just that ring, which is the tread, without the sidewalls, fills that with dirt. And that contains a raised bed small garden for one plant. And he's got hundreds of these tires. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. So we took a little detour about gardening with tires. And so farmers around our area here in Missouri take these used tires, and sometimes they cut the sidewalls off with a Sawzall. Sometimes they leave the sidewalls in place. And you can leave them in place, and you can just put them flat on the ground and fill them with dirt and start growing your garden right there. So you can put one tomato plant in a tire, and right next to that tire you can have another tomato plant and another tomato plant, and you can plant little rows of lettuces. You can have peppers. You can have herbs, and they're all separated by each tire. So there are lots of ways you can do it. Now, some people paint them, and they paint them to make them a little more decorative. To me, they look less decorative when they're painted like orange and blue and green. But some people paint them white for a reason. And the reason to paint the tires white, if you choose to do this, if you have a real sunny area, the tires are going to get warm, and it may be rough on the plants. But if you have a shady area, yeah, you don't have to worry about it if you're in a shady, or have the tire garden in a shady area. And then if you decide you don't like it later on, you can take it apart. But they last almost forever, at least a lifetime. These tires will. So, yes, you can. It works very, very well. I've seen it. And put good dirt in there. I mean, don't try to grow a garden with just clay. You need some loam. You need some humus. You need some nutrients in the soil, and you can have a wonderful garden with just tires. It's not beautiful in every location, but it absolutely positively works. And one farmer I'm thinking of has the best garden I've ever seen with tires, the best. And he keeps the area between the rows of tires clean, so he can walk, and there's no ticks, there's no weeds, and the only growing in the garden is in the tires. Yeah, it absolutely works.
I'll tell you something else that I do. We have a granite soil here, and granite soil is very high in mineral content, but very low in organic matter, and it's not the most nutritious soil for plants to grow in. It's actually quite good for fruit trees, but they need a lot of manure to be dug in as well. But anyway, if you want to grow anything like lavender, rosemary, or sage, any of these real sort of dryland type herbs, you cannot get any better soil for growing them than granite soil. They love it, especially lavender and rosemary. And so what I do is instead of filling up the tires, I've found an easier way to do it, and that is that you go out there once it started to rain, because the thing about granite soil is you just about cannot dig them. I wouldn't say it's impossible to dig them when it's dry, but it's really, really hard work. It's like digging through concrete, just about. And but anyway, it started to rain here, so what I do is I dig a hole about maybe 18 inches or 12 inches wide and about the same depth. And I have a bucket of well-aged manure with me, and I put a couple of double handfuls of manure with the soil I dug out of the hole, and I mix it all up, and then I put it back in the hole. Maybe I'll put some wood chips down the bottom of the hole to help increase the fertility as well. But If not, oh, well, there we go. And then I plant my, my seedling or even just a cutting in the hole, and I put the tire around it. And I mulch it with some of the leaves that are, in the surrounding ground, and I leave it to grow. And I've been able to establish centaurea cuttings and lavender seedlings and, cuttings that I've managed to root and other plants like that. And managed to get them growing on my land, actually in a garden that is protected by a tire but not actually filled with earth.
Okay, we'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs. She's live in Australia. This is USA Prepares. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we were talking about gardening and the use of tires. Guineith, did you want to continue that?
I think that's probably, something I do have to warn about, okay, with regards to the use of tires. Something that you might just want to watch out for. There can be sometimes, not all the time, but there's been people over the years having a debate about things like chromium leaching out of the tires, especially when they're used to grow root vegetables. So, and there's been debate going backwards and forwards over the years of, does this happen, does this not happen? I think that, people have been doing it long enough now that if the heavy metal leaching was going to be any sort of a real problem, then you would have really started to see some ill effects with regards to people's health by now.
Very good
because
point.
people have been doing this for 20, 30 or 40 years, growing, as long as I can remember, people have been growing plants and tires for food. And there doesn't seem to be any visible health effects from, food grown in tires as regards to food grown in the ground. But, I'm just saying that's a thing of do your own research and do what you feel you're comfortable with.
And it's difficult. It is extremely difficult because we don't know everything that goes into tires. Lots of tires today are made in China, Indonesia, Mexico, Taiwan. So tires are made all over the world, and they have the same brand name. So you can buy a Goodyear tire or a Michelin tire or a General tire or some of the other brands, and they're made all over the world. So you can't go by the brand name being made in a specific country. So here's what I do.
Yeah.
We have I bought some fruit trees, small fruit trees that like orange trees and grapefruit trees. And I try to grow them in the house when I can, so I can't leave them outside in the winter. So I have them in these great big pots. And the pots they're these fiberglass pots that you can buy at the big box stores. And I wait until they have some scratched ones, and I get them at half price. But they're from China. And I don't trust the Chinese to keep me safe. I just don't. So what I do is I line them with black plastic. I line the inside of these pots with black plastic that's made in the United States, heavy black plastic, like you might put on your garden anyway. And I poke some holes in the bottom of it so I'll have some drainage. And these pots normally come with a drip tray. So I put the dirt in them, the dirt pushes the plastic out, and the plastic goes all the way to the top of the pot. So if you look, you can see the plastic around the top edge of the inside of the pot. So I think I'm safer with that, but I'm not even sure about that. That's what I do.
Because the builder's plastic especially can have things like phthalates and BPA and stuff like that that can leach out into the soil. So, but like I say, with regards to the tyres thing, people have been doing that forever. And there don't seem to be any health ill effects. And the other thing is that most of the soil's that contaminated anyway. I don't think it makes a difference in most circumstances.
The thing that I'm the thing I'm really concerned
more poison in the soil.
The thing I'm really concerned about is railroad ties. People will use railroad ties for the edging of their raised bed gardens. I wouldn't do that because railroad ties have creosote.
No, because they definitely are treated.
Right. And not only that.
Really nasty stuff.
And yes. And they're sprayed, the rail lines are sprayed with herbicides to prevent weeds from growing, on the rocks under the railroad ties, where the tracks are. So there's plenty of chemicals being sprayed. Then you have the dripping of the leaking tanks of whatever they are transporting by rail over the rails that drips onto the railroad ties. I'm not interested in that, so I don't want railroad ties for gardening purposes. I wanted to share something about some lights that I bought many years ago. In my eternal quest to lower our electric consumption, I bought some LED can retrofit lights. So this is recessed lighting that we have in our farm. And the common nomenclature for these lights is can lights. So if you look at the ceiling, it's kind of a place where you could screw in a traditional light bulb, or you might put a floodlight in there, or a decorative light. But they're these recessed lights. And I decided to, because we were burning out incandescent light bulbs every couple of months, because the heat gets trapped in there, and the curly Q compact fluorescent lights would only last a year. I'm talking about a 7-year bulb that lasts maybe a year because they're screwed in with the base up. The electronics are up, and the electronics get the hottest, and they just wear out so quickly. I've decided to replace them with LEDs, 3,000 degree Kelvin LEDs. Well, the ones I bought years ago were from a company called Sunco, SUNCO. And they have a 5-year warranty. Some of them have a 10-year warranty. But 10-year warranty with no registration. Well, the problem that I've experienced is they burn out. Now, when you call Sunco, you're going to need to have your order number. So if you bought them from Amazon, they'll ship you new ones, replacements, but you have to have your order number. If you don't have your order number, you are out of luck. So I just got off the phone with Sunco. They put me through the hoops yesterday because I didn't have the order number. Well, I did. I called them back during the break, top of the hour break, and they're going to send me 2 replacements. So far, 3 of them have failed. 2 of them have burned out, just stopped working. Now, these are supposed to last 10 years. 2 of them stopped working after like a year or 2, at the most. And then one of them did the weirdest thing. It came apart. The plastic trim ring came apart and fell. Now, that's a problem because if you're sleeping and it lands on your nose, you're going to be bloody. And I said to the customer service representative, there's only 4 little screws that hold this ring in, and they're tiny. They're only screwed in about 1/16 of an inch into the plastic, and the plastic just failed. It's a poorly designed, poorly engineered product, so it's going to fail. And I asked her if I was the only one that had this problem. She said yes. Now, I'll believe that. Well, I'll see that when I believe it, okay? Because I actually think that this is a design defect. So here's why I'm telling you all this. If you happen to have Sunco lights that failed, get your order number, find that. And I'm going to give you the 800 number, the toll-free number to call. 844-334-9938. 844-334-9938. A gal will answer, and if you have your order number, and they believe you, they'll send you replacements at no charge. That's Sunco, S-U-N-C-O, LED lighting. So I just wanted to share that. I had the problem. I believe that other people will have them too. And if you bought them on Amazon, just get your Amazon order number. It's as simple as that. And if you have that, they're going to know exactly where to send the replacements. So you don't need a receipt. You just need your order number. Guineith, what would you like to talk about for the remainder of this broadcast?
Okay, I would like to go back to the topic of gardening, because there's actually a lot of other trees and plants out there that are, mostly it's the government that regards them as being a nuisance. Normally, the people who actually live there, if they're left to themselves, they'll find a use for these sorts of plants. Okay? And many, hundreds of years ago, before the modern world developed, everybody got everything that they needed just about from the plants that were around them. Okay? And one example, I remember I was talking to you earlier off air. I said I could only think of one plant that is absolutely, completely useless, that it is just a nuisance and that there is no use whatsoever for, and that is the South African daisy. And in South Africa, they're a weed here in Australia, and in South Africa, the Zulus and the Xhosa and all the other tribes that are there, the Bantus, they have a saying regarding the South African daisy, and they say, they're so useless you can't even tie your dog up to it. And it's poisonous. It'll kill your livestock. There's no medicinal use for it. You can't even really compost it because the seeds will contaminate the compost and it'll just come up everywhere the next year. There's really only one thing that you can do with a South African daisy, and that's burn it. And, that's about the only thing you can do with it. And you said kudzu vine. And I said, yes, it's a superior basket weaving vine. If you're somebody who makes cane baskets, you cannot get a better cane for basket making than the kudzu vine. That's an example,
Yeah. And if you don't like your neighbors and you live far away from your neighbors and you introduce kudzu, it'll grow right over their house if they don't stop it. It'll just cover their house, literally. Yeah, and I believe it came from Japan to reduce erosion. Yeah, we're talking with Guineith about kudzu, and I believe kudzu was introduced to the United States from Asia, Kudzu, and it's this vine that will grow over anything, whether it be plant or building, and it will cover it and will shade it, and it kills other plants because of its heavy shading. And yes, it can be used for making baskets. And what about animal feed? Guineith, what do you think about that, kudzu for animal feed?
I don't know. I haven't looked into that. I think that it might be okay, but you would have to do. I seem to remember hearing somewhere that you could use its leaves for animal feed, but I'm not sure. I seem to remember hearing somewhere that you could.
Yeah, I believe you can. It's hard to bale because it's a vine, and it's difficult to cut it. But
you'd have to strip the leaves off.
Yeah.
You'd have to cut the vine and then strip the leaves off.
And this vine will climb over trees. Literally, it will use the trees as a structure, and it will climb over them and kill the trees because it shades the trees from sunlight. This stuff is really invasive, and it's a problem once it takes over. And what happened, I believe, is when we were building roads in this country after World War II, I believe this is the story, that as we cut roads through hills, we had these banks that would erode, and it took too long for grass to grow. But these kudzu seeds germinate in 5 to 7 days, and they would take off and cover the newly cut roads. It would cover the dirt and secure the soil, and it was it was amazing how well it worked. But then it went out of control, and it would cover buildings. And if you had a neighbor that had kudzu, that kudzu could devalue your property because it was coming your way. It's hard to stop.
Yeah. But like I say, it's a thing of, because we have gotten away from using the plants around us for everything that we need. You see, in Japan, they don't have this problem, because every time that their kudzu begins to get out of control, they go and they cut it down, and they use the vines for baskets, and they use it for this and that and the other. And it never really gets a chance to get out of control, because the Japanese, for all their high technology, they have something in their culture of maintaining a closeness to nature, no matter how advanced your technology gets. And so you get there, and it is a very ordered society. It is a very beautiful society, but they just about everything is still made from something natural. Do you know what I mean? Except for things like cell phones and computers and all that sort of thing, and roads. Yeah. But as far as possible, you go there and the homes have bamboo mats. The flooring is made of bamboo. Many homes, they still have rice paper windows, and, you go out in the garden and it's koi ponds and goldfish ponds and just, the most beautiful plants you've ever seen, and it's because of their attitude towards nature. They see that everything that they have comes from nature in one way or another, and that they need to maintain a balance. And that's what we've gotten away from in the West. And because of that, we get a plant comes in like kudzu, okay? And like I say, the Japanese would see a kudzu infestation and they'd say, oh, great, time to make some baskets. And you could make some house-sized baskets from these canes. They get really thick. They get enormous. But even so, they would split them down, and they would use the split pieces of kudzu for something or other.
Mm-hmm. And we don't do
bowls,
that.
They would carve them out. Yep.
Yeah, we don't do that. We buy our baskets from China, made out of plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't think like resources are important. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs. Guineith Isaacs, I've got a question for you. What do you think of some of the candidates who want to be the CEO of the United States of America? We've got Jumpin' Joe Biden, who wants to be president. He is known as a plagiarist. We have another guy.
He's known as a fondler of females and children.
Yeah.
I believe he has a nickname, which actually, if you look into it, Democrat Nancy Pelosi actually gave him this nickname, if I remember rightly, and that was Creepy Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's creepy.
About sums it up.
And he's a plagiarist. If you want, just go to your favorite search engine and type in Joe Biden plagiarist or plagiarism, and you'll see that it's true. We got another guy running for candidate, Pete Buttigieg. I don't really know how you pronounce it. I call him Pete Buttigieg.
Him.
He's queer. He's queer. He's
Pete.
Married to another. Yeah, Mayor Pete. He's queer. So we've got a queer running for president, and we've got Jumpin' Joe, the plagiarist Biden.
And don't forget Boyney. Huh? And Bernie Sanders.
So here's
Boyney Sanders.
Yeah, here's the question. What would we think? What would we think of Vladimir Putin if he were queer, if he were a homo? Would we think the same thing of him? Would we have the same regard for him? Or would we not think so much of him? I mean, I respect him. I respect Vladimir Putin. As a matter of fact, when Barry Soetoro was CEO, I was thinking, boy, we got Barry Soetoro and they have Vladimir Putin. Wouldn't it be nice if we could swap and we could get, a real macho, a real man, instead of a light loafered guy. Yeah. So how much respect do you think the United States would have if we had a full-fledged homo as CEO? Do you think that would weaken our respect around the world, or would it make it better? So I'm asking you because you're in Australia.
Well, I'll tell you what. The last time you had a full-fledged homosexual in the White House, the Chinese wouldn't even give him full presidential honors. When Barry flew to China with Michael, they wouldn't allow him to have full presidential honors. They wouldn't greet him properly off the plane, and they wouldn't give him the presidential respect. Mm-hmm. And they certainly wouldn't do so for Michael. It's just that's what happened before. That's what happened the last time. And that's the thing that we in the West don't seem to understand is that homosexuals have been universally shunned throughout history and around the world for a very good reason. Okay? Because they represent the moral decay of a nation. And everybody seems to know it except for the English-speaking world. And maybe the French. They're the only nations on earth that don't seem to recognize this. That empires have fallen because of an excess of homosexual people. It quite literally dooms a nation and dooms empires. The Roman Empire fell because of homosexuality. You go to the art that Rome produced immediately before its fall, and it's full of homosexual sex. You look at I think I mentioned last week or some other time that the Pompeii garden ornaments, and just type in Pompeii garden ornaments onto your favorite search engine and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The whole city was just taken over by this craze for these water fountains. And that's as much detail as I'm going to go into right now, but it's really, it's quite interesting what they were doing with their gardens at the time when Vesuvius erupted. And the rest of Rome said, well, basically that's the gods judging you for your homosexuality. And that was about some of it.
There are people who think that my view on it is, not very kind. That I don't want it in my house. That's for sure. And I told all of our children, I said, if you find out or you think you're queer, don't come home. And I mean it. I absolutely mean it.
Yeah.
Just as I mean other things that I've told them about, what I think is right and wrong. Well, so are you saying that we would be regarded as less than we are if we had another homo in the White House?
Yeah, I think that America would definitely lose respect internationally. And it's like this. The Democrat Party at the moment, the last I heard, had in excess of 20 presidential candidates, and not one of them's any good. And the Republican Party has one. the last I heard. I can't see anybody in the Republican Party saying, well, I think that I could really do a better job of running the country than President Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of any. Have you? Republicans?
No. And I look at I look at the field on the Democrat side, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Disgusting.
And this homo, Pete Butts' gig, is going around the country selling his perversion as if if you don't embrace it, if you don't embrace it, you're a homophobe. Okay, so I'm a homophobe. He wants to do something that's over the top as well. It's something else. He wants to erase the names of President Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson from titles of prestigious annual political dinners around the country because Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson owned slaves. Now, to be clear, my position on ownership of slaves is I think it's wrong to own people. I really do. I don't own anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody in my family I know of throughout history has owned anybody. I wouldn't own somebody. I wouldn't want to own somebody. However, that is the way it was. That is the history. And so if we want to remember history and not own people, then how about remembering that people own people? And two of them were Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. But erasing their names from history doesn't help people from knowing about slave ownership.
I just want to know something. What's his name? I hate to be crass here, but I have to say this. What's what's his name's view on men who wear dog collars and G-strings and allow themselves to be dragged around by other men?
Very interesting
because
question.
That's what goes on at homosexual orgies.
Mm-hmm.
Very good point. What do you call that?
Yes. Yeah. Very good point. And, you look at this guy, and he does not look masculine to me. He looks effeminate. And I don't want somebody that is, could be a man who is really not a full man. And I got to tell you, I think homosexuality is a sin, and I think it's a perversion. And I don't want somebody who's perverted running the country. I really don't. I want somebody who, do I want a CEO who's looking at other guys saying, "Wow, I kind of like that guy," as a sexual partner. I don't want our CEO to be like that. I really want a man's man. And so how much respect would we have for Arnold Schwarzenegger or any of the other real masculine, real men if they were out of the closet as homosexuals? Class, it's wrong. It's wrong. And I will not embrace it. I will not embrace homosexuality.
Yep.
It's morally problematic for me.
It is. It is. And something, it's even if, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's got a lot of really, I don't know if he's put his name forward for Democrat president, but he's got a lot of baggage himself, okay? Namely that he thinks that Adolf Hitler's a great guy. And that he, that he's been spotted hanging around Bohemian Grove from time to time. Mm-hmm. That for me is a real problem, but I don't know if he's thrown his hat into the ring or not, or if he would want to. But at least he is a man's man. At least he's not a wimp. at least he is a fighter, and he's somebody who, I think he's almost 80 years old now, and he still works out every day.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And I would be, you know, there is a stream in the homosexual culture of, like, working out and getting your body beefed and all that sort of thing. But I would be really, really, really surprised if I found out that Arnold Schwarzenegger was homosexual.
Yeah, and I looked up Pompeii garden ornaments, and there's an ancient statue of this female goat, and this man is having his way with this goat. No question about it. It's disgusting. You know, in my opinion, we could have the presidential trifecta here in the United States. We could have, with a Biden butts gig ticket, we could have a groper, plagiarist, and homosexual. We could have the trifecta with those two guys.
Yeah, I would give them Buckley's chance of winning. There's an old saying.
That's good news.
Okay, I'm not even sure where it comes from, and I'm not sure if they use that saying in the United States. But the other saying is cat's chance in hell, snowflake's chance in hell. These other sayings, but they got no chance of winning. You know,
tell me
the
about
only way
your
that
election.
they would possibly win is if this country, which actually I don't think is beyond the possibility, is if the Democrats succeed in flooding the country with such huge numbers of these illegal immigrants that it manages to swing a vote, which is, I think, what they're planning to do. And I saw actually an interesting thing on Facebook the other day. Grandma was a Republican for 80 years, and every election she voted a Republican. But since she died, every election she's been voting Democrat.
Yeah.
Paul
in New Mexico. Yeah, Paul in New Mexico, welcome.
Hey, Vincent, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, I had some emails I wanted to try. Did they come through to you, or can I send them some other way?
I don't think I got them, and the answer is no. I've shut down our email. But is there something that you'd like to say? We only have a couple minutes.
Oh, well, I sure don't want to miss your show every morning. You're putting out a lot of good information that we really appreciate. Enjoyed it immensely.
Well, thank you. We've been attacked, and as a result of being attacked, I shut down our website, and I shut down all email, and I don't take calls from at the farmhouse anymore. And it's really sad. Just a few jerks can cause so many problems for everybody, and so I think they realize that they can easily be hunted down, and we could have a chat with them face to face, and so they've stopped. But we'll see if they resurface. But we may turn back on the website if they just stay underground. But even Guineith has been attacked. Just trying to sell some products on the internet in Australia, she's been attacked by these trolls. These people are sick, absolutely sick. Do you have any other comments, Paul?
No, I just wanted to try to get that information to you. If there's an address or something, well then.
What are you trying to get to me?
Well, you mentioned that you were going to be building another structure, and I had real good luck with a SIP building. You familiar with the structural insulated panels?
Yes, I am.
And that worked really well, and we put a hot water solar system on there that just maintains itself so well and preheats the water for bathing and all that kind of a thing.
I'll tell you what, Paul, why don't you give our engineer your phone number? I will call you, and then why don't you come on the air with me and talk about your insulated building and your hot water heating? Why don't we do that?
Okay, we can do that.
And we can do it on the air. Okay, so give our engineer, don't hang up. Give off air your phone number to our engineer. He will give it to me. I will call you.
Okay.
And then we'll schedule a time for you to come on the air. Okay?
That'll work. Thank
and
you.
so you can tell me and everyone else all at the same time.
All right. Sounds great.
Great.
Talk
Thank
to you
you,
later
Paul.
then. Sure will.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Okay. So I put him on hold.
That's the end of the broadcast.
And it is. It is the end of the broadcast. Gwyneth, thank you for staying up late.
Time flies.
Time flies. Yeah. And class, we don't have to accept perversion in our lives. We really don't have to embrace it. We don't. These guys can go back into the closet where they came from, and they don't need to infect society. They don't need to. And it's crazy to accept their perversion as normal. It's crazy. Any disagreement, Gwyneth? No, Gwyneth's gone. Okay, class, see you tomorrow.